Good afternoon, welcome to Gen 1 Rev 22 Ministries on Wednesday the 25th of March 2020. Today we're going to be looking at the second coming of Jesus Christ and the signs which are written about and which Jesus Christ spoke about, which will precede his second coming. Now, Jesus Christ came a first time and he is going to come a second time. There were many prophecies concerning his first coming, and there are also many prophecies concerning his second coming. But just before we go any further, you might be wondering what this is in front of me here. Well, this is called a Yemenite kudu shofar. Basically, it's a natural trumpet. It's taken off an animal called a kudu, and I'll read a description of what this Yemenite kudu shofar is used for. A shofar is a ceremonial horn instrument used a few times a year in accordance to ancient Jewish tradition. Shofars are usually created from ram's horns, while in Yemenite Jewish culture, shofars are often made from the horns of the kudu. It's a large African antelope. During biblical times, the shape and type of animal born used to make a shofar were important. Horns could be taken only from a kosher animal, like a sheep, a mountain goat, including the kudu. Shofars come in a range of sizes and types, lengths and shapes, depending on a community's tradition, and may also be decorated with silver plating. The shofar is possibly the oldest and most iconic Jewish ritual object made from a ram's horn, a male sheep that is at least 1 year old. The shofar is hollow and is blown in a special way that produces a sound. Now, I must say, this isn't taken from a ram. This is taken from a kudu, an African antelope. The shofar is blown in the synagogue on Rosh Hashanah, Jewish New Year, and on Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, when its distinct primal sound is used to awaken and inspire us to repentance and change. Biblically, the shofar was used in a number of settings. It was blown at the Holy Temple, as well as for anointing holidays in the Jubilee year, Yovel. It has been used for many other things over the course of history and is now a wonderfully significant piece of Judaica, commonly found in Jewish homes and synagogues used during the high holidays. The shofar is one of the oldest wind instruments in the world and was used in the time of the Bible to intimidate the enemy, to declare war, and to call people to assembly. It was also blown during the times of Joshua to help capture the city of Jericho. The army of Israel marched around Jericho to the signal of the shofar, Joshua 6. Tradition links the ram's horn to the ram, caught in the thicket and then sacrificed by Abraham in place of his son Isaac. And that can be found in Genesis 22. Now, the reason I've got this here today, it's because it's the sounding of the trumpet, as described there, is used throughout biblical history, and it's the written record of the trumpet or the shofar or the ram's horn or the kudu African antelope horn and different kinds of kosher horns were used as stated here, but also there are many examples of whereby the horn is blown preceding the second coming of Jesus Christ. So Jesus Christ will arrive after the horn is blown. So the horn will precede the event that Jesus Christ will return. We read where the ram's horn or the shofar horn or any kosher horn is blown. Okay, so just to give you a sound of what the kosher actually sounds like, I have actually been blowing through this. I've had it for a number of years and done quite a bit. You'll be able to hear me blowing the Yemenite kudu shofar in a moment. scriptures concerning the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now, Jesus Christ himself spoke concerning his second coming, and one of his great passages or talk concerning his second coming of Jesus, concerning his second coming, was to his disciples, and we find that in Matthew, the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 24. But before I actually read part of that scripture from Matthew 24, Jesus Christ also spoke to his disciples concerning his second coming a little bit earlier on in his ministry to his disciples, and he was speaking to them concerning his second coming. And if we read in John chapter 14, 1 to 3, "Let not your heart be troubled, believe in God, believe also in me. In my Father's house are many rooms. If it were not so, would I have told you that I go to prepare a place for you? And if I go and prepare a place for you, I will come again and will take you to myself, that where I am, you may be also." Now, Jesus Christ was speaking to his disciples there. He was starting to talk to them and explain to them what must soon take place concerning his death and resurrection, etc., etc. So they became troubled, and he was comforting them by saying, "Well, look, I've come a first time. You know, I've come this time. I'm going to be taken away, but I'm going to come again. And when I come again, I will take you to be where I am." We also have in Hebrews 9, chapter 9, verses 28. "So Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many," because this is why he came the first time, to be the punishment for sin, for our disobedience to God. So that was the purpose of his first coming. And we read that here at the first half of Hebrews 9:28. So Christ, I'll repeat it again. So Christ, having been offered once to bear the sins of many, first time, will appear a second time, not to deal with sin, but to save those who are eagerly waiting for him. We also have Jesus Christ in Matthew 24 talking to the disciples, telling them that he is going to come again, and talking about what will precede, what events will be taking place that will be a sign to them, or signs to them, concerning his second coming. Matthew 24 verses 29 to 31, immediately after the tribulation of those days. So there's going to be a tribulation. There's going to be a period which we're going to talk about in a moment. I'm going to give you the signs coming, pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ. But Jesus Christ is saying to his disciples, after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. Then the sign of the Son of Man will appear in heaven, and then all the tribes of the earth will mourn. And they will see the Son of Man coming on the clouds of heaven with power and great glory. And he will send his angels with a great sound of a trumpet, and they will gather together his elect from the four winds, from one end of heaven to the other. So we see there Jesus Christ speaking to his disciples and telling them there'll be a sound of a trumpet. This will be after the Great Tribulation and various things that must take place. So what we're going to look at now is some of the signs throughout the Old Testament as well, and some from what Jesus Christ talked about in Matthew 24, which will take place prior and will be a sign to the second coming of Jesus Christ. I'm going to use my blogspot, which is gen1rev22blogspot.com, and you'd be free to go there. And if you put into the search bar on the top left hand side, you'll see a search bar with a little magnifying glass. Put in there second coming of Jesus Christ, and you'll get the list which I'm reading from there. So what we're going to do today is cover a few of those signs which are in the Old Testament and which Jesus Christ spoke about. So we have Jesus Christ telling his disciples in Matthew 24 that there will be earthquakes, floods, huge seas as some of the signs which they are to, well, not they are, but this will be future generations which will be occurring on the earth prior to his second coming. Jesus Christ in Matthew 24:4, and Jesus answered them, "See that no one lead you astray," because there's going to be lots of deception going on. He says, Matthew 24:7, there will be earthquakes in various places. We also read in Luke 21:11, there will be great earthquakes in various places and fearful events. Luke 21:25, on the earth distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming upon the world. So if we look at this, earthquakes, floods, huge seas, all these kind of events that will be taking place. Well, yes, there has been earthquakes and floods and things going on throughout human history, but Jesus Christ is talking about a specific time in the future when these events will be so intense that those living at the time will be totally dismayed and in perplexion as to what is coming upon them. Now, over the past 100 years, within living memory, there have been many floods, earthquakes, etc., where many hundreds of thousands of people have died. We have in 1974 the Bangladesh flood, 28,700. We have 1985, I'm not going to read them all out, I'm just going to give you a taster of, you can go to my blog spot and read the list. So I'm just going to give you, a taste of basically stretching back just to demonstrate that we could be living in the times that precede the second coming of Jesus Christ, according to what Chinese flood has been happening, 2,000 deaths in 1995, Italy earthquake, 75,000 deaths 1908, the Haitian earthquake in 2010, 230,000 deaths, Asia tsunami, 230,000 deaths in 2004, Japanese earthquake 2011 and tsunami, 15,000 plus deaths, Burma cyclone, 100,000 deaths, 2008, we have Iran earthquake 2003, thousands of deaths, we have the Chinese flood of 1931, 3,700,000 deaths, we have 1959 Chinese flood, 2 million deaths. But it's not just the earthquakes, there are many more, and if we tally all these other signs which Jesus Christ spoke about together, not individually but combine them together, then it increases the evidence that we could be living in the times that Jesus Christ spoke about to his disciples on the Mount of Olives 2,000 years ago. Now, there's another one which is concerning a global economic system. Now, if you go to my YouTube channel, which you'll be on now watching this, you will see there's a video I made there concerning how we all may be microchipped. So that's another sign pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ, whereby there be a future economic system where no one can buy or sell. But that is taken from the book of Revelation. So I'm not going to go through that now. If you go to that one, you'll find the video. I'll put the link on this video. We've also got wars, signs pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Jesus Christ, Matthew 24:4, and Jesus answered them, again, see that no one leads you astray. You will hear of wars, rumours of wars. See that you are not alarmed, for this must take place, but the end is not yet. For nation will rise against nation, and kingdom against kingdom. When you hear of wars and rumours of wars, do not be alarmed. Such things must happen, but the end is still to come. Now, again, there's over the past 100 years, the world has been thrown into a permanent state of global warfare and genocide like no other time in human history. We have witnessed millions being slaughtered through warfare and genocide. Yep, people have died and there's been wars throughout history, but the increase of them, combined with the increase of earthquakes, combined with all the other signs, tallying them all together, again I'll say, increases the likelihood that we're living in those times that Jesus spoke about preceding his second coming. We have the World War I, 1914-18, approximately 16.5 million deaths. We have Turkey, 1915 to 22.5 million deaths. We have lots of war, the Russo-Polish War, Stalin, 23 million deaths, killed his own people, 23 million deaths. Spanish Civil War, World War II, approximately 75 million deaths. We have 5 million deaths, 41 to 44. Hideko Tojo, Japan, France-Vietnam War, 1946 to 54. Korean War, Mao Zedong with his approximately 50 to 80 million deaths. Israel-Arab Six-Day War, wars in Kenya, Borneo, Vietnam War. We have Guatemala Civil War, Iraq, various Gulf Wars, Kosovo Liberation Wars. So there we have an increase in wars in such a short space of time, the past 100 years, or just a little bit over. And there's many that aren't listed there. We also have, this is from the Old Testament, whereby one of the signs pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ is there will be the capability to basically wipe man off the face of the earth globally. And it's only been in the past, what, 50 years, well, 60 years, 70 years, man has had the capability to wipe man and humanity off the face of this planet with nuclear weapons. And they were used in the Second World War against Japan, Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and we read, and this was written 2,500 years ago, 500 years before the first coming of Jesus Christ. The prophet Zechariah spoke of the second coming of Jesus Christ. He tells us there will be a great battle between Jesus Christ and all the nations that are to surround Jerusalem and Israel during this future event. So Zechariah 14:2, for I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle. Zechariah 14:3, then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations. We are told by Zechariah the kind of catastrophic effects the battle will have on the armies from the nations of the world that go out and battle against the land of Israel. Zechariah 14:12, and this shall be the plague with which the Lord will strike all the peoples that wage war against Jerusalem. Their flesh will rot as their flesh will rot while they are still standing on their feet. Their eyes will rot in their sockets and their tongues will rot in their mouths. So we have there a perfect description of people actually standing, and they're basically incinerated. You know, as they stand, gone. And now for 2,500 years since this was prophesied and recorded, there has not been a time in history where man has been able to produce a weapon that could have resulted in this kind of instant mass devastation, so devastating as to cause such catastrophic and sudden death on such a grand scale, up until the last and present centuries. A nuclear weapon would indeed produce the very effect spoken of here by Zechariah. So it's a mass killing event. we're told by Jeremiah, the prophet, of the grand scale of death caused by these future events. Jeremiah 25:33, and those pierced by the Lord on that day shall extend from one end of the earth to the other. They shall not be lamented or gathered or buried. They shall be dung on the surface of the ground. Extreme radiation levels would certainly prevent burial. So we've got mass killing and unable to bury them. We're also told again, Zechariah 14:1-5, behold, a day is coming for the Lord when the spoil taken from you will be divided in your midst. For I will gather all the nations against Jerusalem to battle, and the city shall be taken and the houses plundered, and the women raped. Half of the city shall go out into exile, but the rest of the people shall not be cut off from the city. Then the Lord will go out and fight against those nations as when he fights on a day of battle. On that day his, Jesus Christ's, feet shall stand on the Mount of Olives that lies before Jerusalem on the east, and the Mount of Olives shall be split in two from east by west by a very wide valley, so that no one half of the mountain shall move northward and the other half southward, and ye shall flee to the valleys of my mountains, for the valley of the mountains shall reach to Azal, and you shall flee as you fled from the earthquake in the days of Uzziah king of Judea. Then the Lord my God will come, and all the holy ones with him. Now they've done research on the ground beneath the Mount of Olives. Now bear in mind this was prophesied 2,500 years ago in the book of Zechariah. Now they would then have not had any means, or would not have known what was underneath the Mount of Olives. They've discovered fault lines under the Mount of Olives. There's unstable ground and a huge, listen to this, underground volume of water. So under the Mount of Olives, which Zechariah prophesied that when Jesus Christ comes back, his feet will stand on the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives will split and water will flow from the Mount of Olives. They found a fault line which travels all the way down, and underneath, if this splits, there's a huge volume of water which would flow out of the Mount of Olives, just precisely as Zechariah prophesied 2,500 years ago. So Jesus Christ's first coming, and 2,500 years before, the very ingredients that will be needed in order for his prophecy to be fulfilled were discovered. Okay, so that is when Jesus Christ actually returns, when his feet hit the Mount of Olives. We also read in Matthew and Luke of pestilences, famines, pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Matthew 24:7, there will be famines in various places. There will be great famines and pestilences in various places, and fearful events, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming upon the earth. So if we look again, go to Gen 1 Rev 22 blogspot, you can see the list, and there's other lists, I'm sure you'll be able to find them on Google. 1980s pandemic, AIDS, global, 60 million people infected, 25 million deaths from the 1980s due to AIDS pandemics. 2011, famine in the Horn of Africa. 1983 to 85, famine Eritrea and Ethiopia, 400,000 deaths. Famine Somalia, 300,000 deaths. What I'll do is I'll put these on the screen so you can read them. I'll do a photo, snapshot of them on the screen for you. You've got 1998, 2004, famine, pestilence, Congo, 4 million deaths. 1917, epidemic, global, 20 million deaths. 1932, famine, Soviet Union, 5 million deaths. 1914, epidemic, Europe, 3 million deaths. 72, Ethiopia, 600,000 deaths. Epidemic, Nigeria, 10,391 deaths. 1991, 1910, epidemic, Asia, 60,000 deaths. 1923, epidemic, Africa, 100,000 deaths. 1926, epidemic, Asia, 423,000 deaths. Jesus Christ spoke about people that will be claiming to be Jesus Christ. Matthew 24:24, false Christs and false prophets will appear and perform great signs and miracles to deceive even the elect. if that were possible. Mark 13:6, many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and they will lead many astray. And he said, see that you are not led astray, for many will come in my name, saying, I am he, and the time is at hand. And Jesus Christ said, don't go after them. Because remember, Jesus Christ said, the whole world will see him coming. The whole world will see him coming on the clouds of heaven. And some people say, well, how will the whole world see Jesus Christ if he comes back and he's coming back to Jerusalem to put his feet on the Mount of Olives? How will the whole world see it? Well, this is another evidence and sign that we could very well be living in the days preceding the second coming of Jesus Christ. We've got live television, we've got satellites, we can easily see what is happening on one side of the world at exactly the same time it's happening, whether it's night or whether it's day. You know, we've got live television, we can see it with our TV screens, you know. So amazingly, over the past 200 years there have been many claiming they are Jesus Christ. Some of the more well-known ones are Arnold Potter, 1804 to 1872, Haile Selassie, 1892 to 1975, Sun Myung Moon, 1920, Marshall Applewhite, 1931 to 1997, David Koresh. I think we can all remember David Koresh in the compound in the United States. What happened there, 1959 to 1993, David Shayler, 1965, and the most recent of these claiming to be Jesus Christ is our very own present day by Oscar Ramiro Ortega Hernandez. Okay, and he was born 1990 up to the present. And on my blogspot you will see a video of Hernando speaking, claiming to be Jesus Christ. So there we have again false Christs, which Jesus Christ clearly spoke about, Matthew and Mark. You can go and check Matthew, Mark, and go and check Luke 7, chapter 17, Luke 21. Also we have that Israel will become a land refreshed with water. Water will refresh the parched desert wilderness of Israel. The rebirth of the nation state of Israel. For 2,000 years, since 70 AD, this was when the Romans laid waste to Jerusalem, levelled the temple to the ground, killed millions of people, millions of Jews, you know, and they had a siege against Jerusalem. And women were even eating their babies. They'd give birth and eat the child because they had no food. They had no food to eat. You know, cannibalism was rife at the time, and the Romans totally decimated Jerusalem and slaughtered millions. You can read about that. You can Google that. So we got, for 2,000 years since 70 AD, the land that present day Israel occupies was left to become a parched desert wasteland. It was not until following the rebirth of Israel in 1948, and that's within, for most of us, or our grandparents at least, living memory, in 1948, Israel was then, even though there would have been people still living in the land, but Israel was officially recognised again as a nation, and Israel was a deserted wasteland at the time, and the people of the Jews from around the world were brought back to Israel. Now, the desert wastelands were refreshed with water, and the evidence for this is that Israel is indeed no longer a wasteland, but has been able to manage its water supply. This is exactly what was said would happen when God brought Israel back to the land He had said they would return to. Now, this is coming back to the Old Testament now. The prophet Isaiah, 2,500 years ago, the same as Zechariah gave the prophecies of what would be signs that would be when Jesus Christ returns, concerning Jesus Christ putting his feet on the Mount of Olives, and also the nuclear capabilities spoken about. So 2,500 years ago, Isaiah wrote, I will open rivers on the bare heights and fountains in the midst of the valleys. I will make the wilderness a pool of water and the dry land springs of water. I will put in the wilderness the cedar, the acacia, the myrtle and the olive. I will set in the desert the cypress, the plane and the pine together, that they may see and know, may consider and understand together, that the hand of the Lord has done this, the Holy One of Israel has created it. We have another one here concerning Israel. Israel will fill the whole world with fruit. Considering it's now no longer a desert, parched land, devoid of any moisture in the soil, and the rain is not too often in Israel, and they have managed to come up with systems to water their crops, etc. Israel will fill the whole world with fruit. For 2,000 years, since AD 70, the land that present day Israel occupies was left to become a wasteland where nothing much grew and the earth was unfruitful. It was not until following the rebirth of Israel, as I said already, 1948, that the unfruitful ground was transformed into a fruitful earth. Since 1948, after laying dry and barren for some 2,000 years, Israel has become one of the major fruit providers of the world. Okay, so you can click on the links on Gen1 Rev 22 blogspot, and they give you the links to demonstrate that Israel's agriculture and etc. has, its prowess and so on in sending fruit all over the world. This is exactly what God, through Isaiah the prophet, said would happen when God brought Israel back to the land. He promised they'd return. Isaiah 27:6, in days to come Jacob Israel shall take root, Israel shall blossom and put forth shoots and fill the whole world with fruit. Isaiah 26:6. I'll say it again. Israel shall blossom and put forth shoots and fill the whole world with fruit. Now this is probably a little bit, I've already described Israel coming back in 1948, but the fact that Israel came back to be a nation in 1948 is one of the other signs, and it's a very important sign because, like I said before, for 2,000 years Israel was not a nation since AD 70. For 2,000 years, since 70 AD, as I said, the Jews were dispersed around the world, and since the Jews have been dispersed around the world, they've experienced great tribulation wherever they've been. They were basically hounded, mass murdered. They still are today. Wherever the Jewish people go, they are face anti-Semitic, anti-Jewish, anything people can throw at them. The hatred towards the Jews is to mass murderous levels. Our recent history demonstrates that. History throughout the past 2,000 years demonstrates that wherever they go. But God said he would bring them back. In Deuteronomy 28:64-66, and the Lord will scatter you among all peoples from one end of the earth to the other, and there you shall serve other gods of wood and stone, which neither you nor your fathers have known, and among those nations you shall find no respite, and there shall be no resting place for the sole of your foot. But the Lord will give you there a trembling heart and failing eyes and a languishing soul. Your life shall hang in doubt before you. Night and day shall be in dread and have no assurance of your life. So there we have again, prophecies in the Old Testament written hundreds of years prior to the Jewish people being dispersed around the world. And we know, as I've said, from our recent history, how the Jews have been treated by the nations that they were put into, or they went to. Leviticus 26:33, and I will scatter you among the nations, and I will unsheathe the sword after you, and your land shall be a desolation, and your cities shall be a waste. So there we have again the desolation of Israel from AD 70. It happened to them multiple times prior to AD 70. The Babylonians, the Assyrians, you know, they took them, they came in, and because they disobeyed what God's, they turned away from God who put them in that land, and then they went into as captives into all these other nations. But this is clearly speaking also of a future event whereby the nations of the world will have within them the Jewish people, and the nations of the world will not treat them as as friends, if you like. They'll be treated as enemies, and people will be against them. Nazi Germany, another one. Jeremiah 29:14, I will be found by you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back from captivity. I will gather you from all the nations and places where I have banished you, declares the Lord, and will bring you back to the place from which I carried you into exile. So Jeremiah 29:14, what happened in 1948? Fulfillment of this prophecy in Jeremiah 29:14. God bringing back the people of Israel to their homeland that he had promised them through Abraham. Now in 1948 the Balfour Declaration was declared, exactly as it says, and very soon after the end of the Second World War, 1939 to 45, after millions of Jews had been executed during the Nazi Holocaust in the concentration camps of Europe, some 2,000 years after the dispersion in 870 AD into the nations of the world, the Jewish people once again became a nation called Israel. And the significance of the regathering of the Jews into the nation state of Israel in 1948 after 2,000 years of wanderings within the nation of the world is that we are told when this happens, at some time soon after they're being brought back to the land, Jesus Christ will return a second time. So clearly Israel needs to be in place before the nations of the world can be gathered against it. 1948. And as shown, this happened in 1948, 2,000 years after being dispersed. It must also be noted that never before have the nations of the world been gathered together against Israel. Again, clearly a future event. And if we look at the nation of Israel, we can see surrounded by it are Arab nations, Islamic nations, and Israel is tiny. Now, these nations despise Israel. They're surrounded by it, you know. If they wanted to, they could just attack Israel at a moment's notice, but God is holding them back for the right time. God is in control. In our time we see Israel increasingly under siege by our Arab neighbours, and the Middle East region is constantly in the news. During the past 8 years there have been 12,000 Qassam rockets fired into southern Israel by our Arab Hamas neighbours. Civilians are being targeted. When I say past 8 years, it was probably, I think we can all remember when rockets were being fired into Israel. This article's been on there for a couple of years, so it won't be literally this past 8 years, it'll be past 8 years from when the article was first put on there. And the question is, are we witnessing biblical prophecy written down and given some 2,500 years ago being fulfilled in our time? We have also, the nation of Israel will become like a garden with much vegetation coming in with the water, with the fruit basket of the world. We read this in Ezekiel, again, Old Testament. And when I bring you back, people will say, this former wasteland is not like the Garden of Eden. The abandoned and ruined cities now have strong walls and are filled with people. The wilderness and the dry land shall be glad. The desert shall rejoice and blossom like the crocus. It shall blossom abundantly and rejoice with joy and singing. The last one I'm going to touch on today is the proclamation of the gospel. The good news of Jesus Christ to all nations and the ends of the earth is another sign pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Now when Jesus Christ, speaking to his disciples, he told them in Matthew 24:14, he told them, this gospel of the kingdom will be proclaimed throughout the whole world as a testimony to all nations, and then the end will come. Mark 13, and the gospel must first be preached to all nations. So we see Jesus Christ telling his disciples another sign will be that the gospel has gone out to all nations. You know, there aren't that many nations in the world today, if any, that have not had the gospel proclaimed to them. Jesus Christ stated that one of the signs that will point to the time of his second coming to the earth will be the gospel good news of Jesus Christ having reached every nation and having gone out to the ends of the earth. Jesus Christ himself told his disciples to go and proclaim the gospel to all peoples, tribes and nations. Mark 16:15, and he said to them, go into all the world and proclaim the gospel to the whole creation. Whoever believes and is baptized will be saved, but whoever does not believe will be condemned. Matthew 28:19 and Matthew 28:19. Therefore go and make disciples of all nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son of the Holy Spirit. It must be realized that this commandment was given 2,000 years ago, and today we are witnessing the works, gospel, good news of Jesus Christ being proclaimed on a global scale. We are living in a world today which is able to send vast amounts of information out to every corner of the globe within seconds. Surely we are living in an age close to that which Jesus Christ described will be in existence at his second coming. And the gospel must first be preached to all nations. Mark 13:10. Are we witnessing the very words of Jesus Christ spoken 2,000 years ago being fulfilled in our time? So we've looked at some of the signs that Jesus Christ spoke about which will precede his second coming, and as I have said, we're not looking at them individually, we're looking at them collectively. And this is how we collect evidence to support the case. We collect the evidence and then take it as a whole. And it seems to me that we are living very close to the second coming of Jesus Christ, when Jesus Christ will place his feet on the Mount of Olives, and the Mount of Olives will split in two, and water will come up from beneath the Mount of Olives and flood part of Jerusalem, as spoken by the prophets 2,500 years ago, and the water and the crack in the Mount of Olives being discovered only recently, in preparation as a sign for when Jesus Christ does place his feet back on the Mount of Olives. My aim today was just to show that the Bible does speak that Jesus Christ will not just come the first time, but a second time. You know, there might be different opinions in the timing of specific events of Jesus Christ coming, i.e. will he come to take his believers out of the world prior to his second coming? Will the fact that he takes his believers out of the world, will that be part of the second coming? But we clearly read that Jesus Christ will gather his elect and return to the earth at his second coming with the sound of the trumpet. So we've looked at today's signs pointing to the second coming of Jesus Christ. That will be happening on the earth preceding his second coming. And we're just going to finish off with 1 Thessalonians 4:13-18. But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that ye sorrow not even as others which have no hope. But if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so we shall be forever with the Lord. Wherefore comfort one another with these words. Amen. So Gen 1 Rev 22 Ministries, thank you, and see you again soon.